Hi, my name is Allison Zamuda, and welcome to 10-Minute Tuesdays. I'm actually your guest interviewer today because I am having the pleasure of interviewing two of my colleagues and close district partners, Jodi Kryzanski and Donna Rusack. So Donna, Jodi, can you introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Donna Nestler-Rusack, and I am the Assistant Superintendent for the Avon Public Schools.
And I'm Jodi Kryzanski. I'm the Program Director for Avon Public Schools.
And can you tell us a little bit about your school district to give folks a sense of scope, size, that kind of thing?
We're a smaller school district. We have 5 schools with approximately 3,300 students. We are a very high achieving school district and have been recognized, statewide for our standardized test results. Well over 90% of our students go on to college, and we're one of the top scoring districts on the SATs.
So you started using Understanding by Design close to 7 years ago. Can you talk a little bit about why you were interested in shifting to the Understanding by Design model?
When we began our work back then, our curriculums had last been revised in the late 1990s. So coming into the district knew that was one of my first charges. So we did a hunt for curriculums, Jodi and I. We're still looking for a few, aren't we? So we started that work, and what we recognized was that there was no formalized curriculum review and evaluation or revision cycle in place. I think we used every curriculum model that was ever invented within the district. And really there was no sense of urgency to change because obviously we were performing really well. So if you're doing well, sometimes you just get very comfortable in that. But with that said, that's also very exciting because we had a blank slate with which to work. So the first thing that Jodi and I did is we revamped our Curriculum Professional Development Council, which we call CPDC, which had previously been made up of one principal, one teacher, and from each building, and the teacher of the year. So we morphed that group into about 45 people with representation from each grade level, each department, administrators, so that we had that K-12, because we thought it was very important that we look at everything K-12 as opposed to buildings. And all of the work at that point was being done pretty much at the building level. So we started with our council of identifying what were the key components of effective curriculum that we as a district embrace. And from there, we went forward and looked at, was it 3 or 4 models? 3 models. We gave an overview of each model. And then the charge to the group was that they could not leave that day until they had come to an agreement on a model, because we knew we'd never make full consensus. So we said we'll come to an agreement. So we had 6 tables, and 5 out of 6 agreed that we should go with Understanding by Design. And the 6th table went with the inquiry-based, which was what, Jodi?
Lynn Erickson's concept-based learning.
And they were really pushing for the inquiry-based, and the other tables were saying, well, that should just naturally be in the curriculum. And they thought to jump from really no curriculum models per se to that model was too big a jump for teachers. So we landed on Understanding by Design. At that point in time, they also were very clear to me that they needed professional development, and that one and done model was not good enough. And, we couldn't just pluck someone local to come in and do that work. So the first thing I did was to call Grant Wiggins and Jay McTighe, because I do take rejection really well, because the question I really wanted to ask them was, who do you recommend? And both of them recommended Allison Zamuda. And we began our relationship at that point in time and have been together ever since. So obviously I'm good at keeping my promises to people because we've been together almost 7 years.
Absolutely. Well, and I think one of the other areas of focus not only was the concern about laying your hands on existing curriculum, but at that time, the Common Core at statewide was starting to be rolled out. And I think that was another impetus for how can we continue to be on the forefront of examining these brand new standards and making it sort of a meaningful foundation as we're moving into that vertical articulation.
And that started as a very good ground level place for us to begin because it centered the work in one area.
Yes.
And we were really moving from that culture of isolation where teachers were working not only within their buildings, but more so within their classrooms, to how are we looking at these standards K-12? How are we going to determine what we want our students to know and be able to do by the end of each grade level,
Right.
going through, so that they weren't having these deja vu moments as they were heading through our curriculum. So one of our biggest shifts was really looking at the curriculum through the lens of what's best for students as opposed to what's best for the adults. So that was a big shift for us in the thinking. But we arrived when they started mocking us, probably in the third curriculum review we were doing. So we knew that we had made the point there. So really that was how we started that work, was through those content areas. We did begin with English language arts. We were going to do that for a year and then begin math. That worked really well. In 6 months, we were on to math because people saw the urgency then of the work and wanted to get involved. Is there anything you want to add on that, Jodi?
I would also add on that journey, the shift for our district was to look more closely to the standards and understand the standards and what that means for both our students and for us as teachers, and what our instruction would look like. In many cases in the past, a program or a textbook was more heavily relied upon, especially in the elementary buildings, in terms of being the curriculum. So there was a little bit of relearning of what our unifying view of our curriculum was, and it wasn't a textbook or a program, but it was actually the units that we would design that were based on the standards.
And so I know one of the other challenges that you mentioned earlier is the alignment of what could be legitimately agreed to across a range of grade level teachers, but also in some cases across buildings. So the challenge of really starting to think about how we started to play out the different activities or the different frames of units, and we started seeing that deja vu. So that was definitely one of the challenges. I think another challenge that we started to make sense of is really what the standards required of classroom teachers, and what standards did folks have real ownership of already, and what standards they had to continue to get acclimated to, that potentially began to redefine what my job is as an English teacher or a math teacher or a science teacher. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think part of that work is one of the reasons we looked at it K-12 was to really say, what does this look like all the way through for a student, and not look at it in isolation by grade level, which you can do. I mean, that's one approach. But like I said, we had that beautiful clean slate, so we could start with that K-12. And actually, since then, we've backed down to pre-K. So we've expanded our range. But I think the important thing that we did really was to bring a core group together that represented the K-12 in the initial work, to really define what are those long-term transfer goals for each department. And we did a similar process for each department. And then from there, what are our K-12 understandings, essential questions that we define that we're going to use across all of those grade levels. With that said, obviously, we can tailor it as we're developing different units and add additional ones, but these are the ones that we agreed to K-12. And as you speak of the standards, part of that work too, I think, was taking all of our work back to the full component of teachers at each grade level, to give feedback after we did that work, for them to put their fingerprints on, so to speak, and also give us information coming back. But then as we looked at the standards, identifying what should be in each grade level and what's owned there, but looking at it in that bigger sense instead of so narrow, really helped people, I believe, understand those standards. And when we decided to go with understanding by design, we talked about that model, which people weren't familiar with, except maybe the 1 or 2 departments that were using that particular model, and also the Common Core standards. So we learned by doing through the work. We didn't have lectures on this is what UbD is, here are the standards. We just started by saying, okay, we're going to create long-term transfer goals. Let's start unpacking what those standards are saying. So it was really professional development embedded in the work,
Yes.
which takes a little bit longer, but I think in the end, people understand it a lot better than some small group creating a document and people reading it and saying, okay, that everyone had to struggle with that, including ourselves. I mean, we all grew through that process.
So in the next interview we're going to talk a little bit more about lessons learned along the way. So over our 7-year journey together, what did we learn the hard way, and kinds of tips and tricks that we can offer based on our collective experience. So thank you so much, Jodi and Donna, and we'll see you in the next interview.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.